watching ABN. You are watching ABN.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Light and Darkness. Today we will be talking about one of my more favorite topics, which is our limitations. In this society, we always highlight and focus on our strengths. What are my strengths? How should I pursue my strengths? How do I become successful in this society, in this generation, with my strengths? What are the attributes that God has blessed me with that you don't have? How can I beat you in this area, areas of your weakness? Well, this topic or this episode is going to take another look on it. It's talking about our limitations. And when we talk about our limitations, it can be looked at as a weakness, but I see it as a strength, because the Bible says, when I am weak, then I am strong. And it's talking about in the spiritual realm, when I rid myself, of my strengths, of my own fleshly muscles, or of my flesh, of my desires, then I become strong. Why? Because as soon as I'm ridding myself of these strengths, or I call them weaknesses, but let's call them physical strengths, therefore that's when the strength of God can come and lift me higher than I've ever been lifted before. And so my strength really becomes my weakness, and His power overcomes or takes over my flesh. And in comparison, my strongest strength in the physical realm is flat, is incomparable with a drop of heavenly strength, or a drop or a glimpse of the strength of God. And so we're going to talk about our limitations, and the verse is John 1:3-5, and it says, through Him all things were made. I like that, because when you say all, it's all encompassing, it's all inclusive. It's not 99%, it's not 99.9%, it's not 50%, it's not maybe, it's not part-time, it's not Monday through Friday. It says, through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it. And this is the area. It says, and the darkness has not understood it. And this is a great thing, because if we really understood it, if we're living in a dark generation, and if we really understood the light, then the intensity of the light would not have the power that it has. But because we are living in such a dark generation, because we are living in, sometimes the way that I see it is that we are living in a seminary, not a seminary, a cemetery. We're living in a cemetery of dead bodies, a generation of bones. And because of that, the darkness has not understood the light. Because of that, you'd think that in a cemetery, when something living walks a cemetery, we will be able to recognize it. Well, yes, we recognize it, but recognition is much different. It's a different story than understanding it. And sometimes when we see something, if we are dead and we see something living, the first thing maybe can be fear. The second thing maybe can be rejection. The third thing maybe can be surprise or astonishment, or something odd. If you're in a cemetery and it's all dead bodies and there's one that's living, it's a pretty odd thing, right? So, and that's why it says the darkness has not understood it. And because it's not understood it, sometimes we don't necessarily gravitate towards the light, because there's that differentiation. They're made up of two different things. One has life within it, and the other is lifeless. Two completely different matters, two substances. And although I tend to say one does not understand the other, I would say, instead of one not understanding the other, I would say that the darkness doesn't understand the light, but the light does understand the darkness, because the light has life in it. There is a fountain of life flowing through it, and that knowledge and all of that, it understands what is dead, because what is dead is much easier to understand than what is alive. And the dead certainly cannot understand those who have life, or that which is the source of life and light. And so it says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it, which is not necessarily a hopeless situation. It's just diagnosing that the darkness has not understood it. And so it's insinuating that there is more to be understood. There is more that needs, that the darkness needs to do to come closer to the light, to try to see if the darkness can be dissolved by the light. Because as soon as you put a light within a darkness, it completely eradicates that darkness. But the darkness has to do its job in order for the light to be spread. And the light can only be light. It cannot be darkness. It cannot force darkness to be to be light. All it can do is penetrate through the darkness, and there is hope. And Jesus says that Jesus talks about the graveyard with the dead bones, and the dead bones can come to life in the book of Ezekiel. And so he's just illustrating that although these may be dry, dead bones buried underground for years and years and years, and although the natural eye can look at it and say, this is lifeless, there's absolutely no hope, the purpose of Jesus coming to the world was to bring life back to that darkness, was to put flesh on those bones, and to breathe life back into those dead bodies that were once seen to be hopeless and really a lost cause. And so it says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it. And so the highlight here is, what side are we on? Where do we stand? Are we in the light, or are we in the darkness? Or are we in the shadow, where we're sort of in between? Or does the shadow exist? Those are the questions that would be good to start asking and reflecting and meditating on, to understand where exactly we stand. And if we're in the shadow, are we closer to the darkness? Is it just part of the darkness, and just the reason that we're in the shadow is because of the existence of the light? Or is it because we belong to the light, and the darkness is sort of casting this darker side within us? And more importantly, is where do we want to be? Do we want to remain where we are? Do we want to, maybe if we're in the shadow, if we're looking at the light, and the light is too bright and it's too much to handle, and we can't handle the power of the light, then maybe we want to say, you know what, we're more comfortable in the darkness. This is the society that's been created, and that's where I prefer to be, and that's my comfort zone. And that's really God. He gives us a free will and a free choice to do that. Of course, it's going to be a more unsatisfying life, a more probably a life, I wouldn't say necessarily filled with regrets, but definitely not the most abundant life that God has planned for us. But of course, the key is in our hands, the choice is in our hands, and it's really, at the end of the day, one or the other. And in order to be in the light, we have to go to the source of the light. It's not enough to stand in the shadows. It's not enough to want a little bit of light here and then darkness there. The real thing is to just chase after that light and nothing else. And then at the end of the day, we will get what we want. And at the end of the day, the darkness will be dissolved. And at the end of the day, we will then be a light for future generations to come. So the key is always in our hands. And God, He is expecting us to make the right choice for our benefit and also for the benefit of future generations. Thank you for joining me today. Light or darkness, focused on our limitations. See you next time.